Thanks, Linda. Coffee situated here just in case. So good morning. I'm really excited to share some of my journey with dogs and then have some great congregational dialogue, which I've missed because, so those of you who have been around for a long time, remember the days when we were really small and we would have congregational dialogue after almost every sermon, and it was just wonderful. So I thought, I'm doing that today. So I would like, as Linda said, as you're listening, I would love to hear your life journeys and how you've been impacted and influenced and inspired by your pets. So be thinking of that as we go. And I have to give you a little bit of what's happened in my life in this last weekend. Well, this Friday I moved from a house on the north side to a house on the south side. And if you have moved recently, you know how everything is, I had to pack for weeks, and now I'm swimming in a sea of boxes, and my head is finally starting to settle down. But that's why I'm sorry that I'm going to have to kind of read this and not do so much off the top of my head, because who knows where my head would go. All right, so I'm Kathy Ryder, and I grew up with dogs. My parents practiced parenting first with a Springer Spaniel, and then me. My ex-husband and I did the same thing. My son and his wife are still in the dog rearing stage, and my daughter and her husband practiced on a cat. No wonder Dell is so independent. That's my grandson. He's turning 3. I won't bore you with too much history, but a little background is going to help. I was definitely a Springer Spaniel fan, and my ex and I bought a Springer puppy soon after we bought our first house. And as you know, or may know, that Springers are a breed that they're very hyper-friendly, merry tail, and need lots of exercise because they're very active. They instinctively know how to hunt, and we learned very fast you have to get that dog outside exercising so that we can all have some downtime. And our first dog was Lady. She was our first baby. We practiced on her, and we learned a lot, and we took her to classes, and we loved her dearly, except for the whining. I'm sure somehow we reinforced that whining, but you know, you're learning on your first one. And we added a second Springer puppy about 2 years later, and our family kept saying, enough with the dogs, when are the kids coming? But we loved all the adventuring and camping and hiking and hunting, my husband was a hunter, that the dogs brought. So then fast forward to having kids. Boy, suddenly the dogs became lowly dogs, and the baby became our primary loved object. And luckily, our 2 dogs never really realized that that sweet baby talk that we were giving to the baby wasn't meant for them. They just thought, whoa, now we get some sweet talk. And so that helped them accept the baby, and then later another one. So luckily, with all the toddler unpredictability, they did pretty well. And having dogs while you're going through that intense parenting stage is wonderful to get outside and walk. And we would take turns, and that was an awesome thing for both of us, I think. Managing work, parenting, the household, and that monkey brain that just keeps going, and you get out with the dogs and you just can breathe and look at nature. So we managed to add another puppy after each dog passed, so we always had 2 at a time. The timing of acquiring the 5th Springer was the fall that Carl, my son, went off to college, and he joked that we replaced him with a puppy. Yeah, Molly was a great distraction. from the start of empty nesting. By the time Molly Dog was 7, Duke and I were breaking up. We agreed to share custody of the dog. When I got an apartment, I found one that was pet-friendly, and it happened to be on the edge of Northwest Park. And I'd never heard of that park, but I got to know it very well because my back patio door opened right out onto the trails. And before and after work, every day, Molly and I would venture out and explore those wooded trails. And at the time, the park wasn't very well known. A lot of people who did hear said, oh, that's that gem on the north side. And it was a little scary for me at first because there were lots and lots of trails and I didn't know where I was going, but slowly we got to know all those trails, and it brought so much joy to be able to let go of everything at least twice a day and just walk those trails. I let my issues sort themselves out unconsciously, and I'd come back in with a clearer mind. It was a wonderful spiritual practice, regardless of how deep the snow was or how bad the mosquitoes were. Oops, I have to find the right where I am here. Something got a little screwed up. Sorry. Oh, there we go. So I was out there every day, regardless of the weather. Trees became friends, and I always felt safe. I got to know the trails really well. Even in the dark, I would go out with a headlamp that didn't show much, but I knew where all those trails were, and Molly was always ahead of me. She was a go-getter. Well, dogs age faster than humans, so 5 months after being in the apartment, I moved to a twin home, and shortly thereafter, Molly passed. She was getting old. She was 14 and a half and very slow. Didn't know what her rear half of her body was doing, and finally it was time. So that was extremely difficult for me. I was just devastated, and it took me a while to get through that grief. But one thing that helped was going back to Northwest Park and walking through all of our trails and seeing that joy and having the memories of Molly and her silly habits of, I'd throw a stick and she'd take it and run ahead, and then she'd drop it and kind of hide it for me. And I'd come catch up to her and, oh, look, there's a stick. And I'd take it and throw it ahead. And she was very obsessed with retrieving sticks and balls. So those were great memories. Because I was newly retired, I was kind of re-examining who I was, and I didn't think getting another dog right then was a good thing. So I decided that dog sitting and volunteering was fine. So I did some dog care, and that was fun, but in a way it made me miss Molly, because of course no one else's dog is as nice, that's as good as what your dog is, just because of all the routines you get into. So anyway, that did help me with getting my dog fixed. So my travels were calling me, and I just was rationalizing, I don't have time for a dog. And many trips later, then the pandemic hit. And I wasn't one of those people that rushed out during the pandemic to get a dog. I wasn't sure about the anchor that a dog would add to my life. But the universe had different ideas for me, and towards kind of the middle to the end of the pandemic, remember when things were up and down and we thought, we're through with this, and then the next round would come through and it's like, oh boy. And how many vaccines did you get? Well, that should solve the world, but it didn't. So anyway, I was enjoying getting out and walking with friends, but not with the dog, and also connecting. The pandemic made me really get too involved on Facebook. And so a friend of mine in Madison was fostering dogs, and I saw that she said, oh, there's this very sweet dog that we're fostering, but the adoptive home fell through, and so we're looking for a home, and this is what she's like, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, sounds like a really ideal dog. It won't hurt just to ask a few questions. So asked a few questions and messaged back and forth, and then we talked on the phone about what the process might be of adopting, and the next thing I knew, I was running down to Madison to meet her. And of course, I fell in love, because if you meet a dog, you're gonna fall in love. So that one week, I got my adoption application in, the money in, and all that, and I was approved to adopt a dog. And I thought, what am I doing? And it's always, you know, when your experience with the dog has been raising puppies, and you kind of feel like you mold them from day one, and they slowly learn what you expect. And when you have two at a time, the older dog is teaching the younger dog, what are the rules of the house? What are the, what happens around here? And the younger one learns. So we really, I don't know, puppies weren't that difficult. And here I was taking on a 2-year-old dog from Puerto Rico that had never lived in a home, well, lived in a foster home in Madison for a month. And I don't know how long she was living in a foster home in Puerto Rico. Long enough that they had picked her up with a bunch of other dogs. She was in a foster home long enough. She had had a litter. There was one puppy left with her. They weaned her. It was close to 8 weeks for that puppy, and then they spayed her. So she was healing up, and then came to Madison and healed more in a foster home with 2 elderly golden retrievers and a wonderful family. So that was her experience of learning what it's like to be, at least in an American home. I don't know what it was like in Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico. And people always ask, does she know Spanish? It's like, I don't know. So I could tell when I got her that she was just scared to death, but she wanted to please me, and I think some of that was realizing now I'm the one where the food comes from and the pets come from, and she was just so timid, and I wasn't, you know, it was so unlike hyper little Springer puppies with tails wagging. Her tail was always between her legs, and she always followed me. So many dogs, especially, you know, puppies are pulling you around like this, and Soley was behind me all the time, and still is a lot of the time. Her name had been Sol in Puerto Rico, S-O-L, for meaning sun in Spanish, and instead of just changing it totally, I added the EY, so she's Soley. Sometimes I call her Sol. Just get a sip. So she checked out healthy at the vet. She came with some documents, including her spaying and vaccination certificates. She was pretty much healed up from the spaying, but she still she'd been shaved down, and I found it hard to believe that she was part golden, because she looked like a yellow lab. She was all shaved up. And she had a crook, you could see when she had been shaved. Her tail is about half as long, and then there's like a V in it. It's a broken tail. now I forget that it's even there because she has so much fur over it and no one else really can see that, but it's not as long as a normal golden tail. Let's see. Slowly she got used to walking with me on a leash, always behind me and always slow. She ate pretty well. She learned to sleep on the doggy beds. She wouldn't wake me up. I'm not asleep on the bed or have dogs on the furniture type just because of our earlier time with hunting dogs that are always full of burrs and stuff. They just weren't allowed on the furniture. And that's just me, I guess. So I would carry treats in my pocket and try to get her to walk up with me, feed her a treat on the left side, get her to heel and all this. Well, she would be close to me for the treat and then she'd go back behind. And it's like, well, all right. I took her to doggy school, the first classes, and she did really well. She was such an observer, and she wouldn't really interact that much. She stayed way back from any reactive dogs, and then when a friendly dog would come up and wiggle at her, and then she would sniff and show some kind of joy or whatever to meeting another dog. But she's just kind of a scared little thing. She's getting much better now, but at that time she was pretty timid. So being on a leash with me a lot, I really wasn't sure for like couple of months, what would she do if she was off leash? And during that time, I'd purposefully drop the leash. In the house, I could get her to come. I didn't know if I didn't have her on the leash, would she be able to come? Would she want to come? And I realized that she didn't want to lose me, and I didn't want to lose her. It was this mutual thing that all of a sudden, it's like we both understood that. And she could be off leash, and I'd watch her, and she'd watch me, and then she'd go off, and suddenly her tail was up like a flag, and she was this joyful dog, just being a dog in the wild, in the weeds, going after the gophers and the chipmunks, and those little sounds they make. And then she'd jump and she'd find another little hole, and it made me so joyful that she's able to do that and not be timid. So then I would get her out more and more off leash, and I think she really, really liked that. So when I was in a hurry, when I was with our springers, I was always working. And a lot of the time, raising a family and doing 50 million other things. And so always in a hurry. And so a dog pulling ahead or even healing, you want to hurry them along from all the sniffing and the peeing. You kind of get to know where they like to pee. And so you go to that area and you hurry back. It's all like, let's fit this into my routine. Now I'm retired. I have a slow dog. And it didn't really matter to me that she wants to sniff all along. And now she doesn't like peeing right away. She wants to smell where all these other dogs have been before she decides where to go, which can drive you nuts. But I've just learned I have to let go of that and she'll pee when she wants to pee. And a lot of times it isn't till you turn around and start coming back. And then she'll do number 2. So that was a change for me that I had to be patient about. And I saw a meme on Facebook, of course, but this just cracked me up. My dog is so obsessed with where other dogs go to the bathroom that she could be the governor of Florida. So, being a slow dog, I didn't get out walking with my friends as much because when I would go walking with friends, we'd normally go pretty fast and kind of get a little exercise, but still be able to talk. And with Soley, I'm like, she's saying, wait, I have to smell this, wait. And there's just no getting her going. So I tend to do more walking alone with my dog than inviting my friends, hey, let's go dog walking, because she's not like one to go with other dogs and go ahead. She's just on her own time. I call it Puerto Rican time, but I don't know. And I thought, being in the heat of Puerto Rico, that she would be fine in the heat here, and she slows down more, just like maybe that's what they do in Puerto Rico, is get slower. I don't know. But I am not getting as much exercise walking, and that's something I just had to let go of and go, okay. So Soley's a wonderful dog, and she has learned to be affectionate and gone from having her tail between her legs a lot to now wagging her tail when she sees her friends, wagging her tail when I come in the door. And the first couple of months, she never wagged her tail. It was so sad. I just thought, and I just was patient, and I thought, well, who knows when that's going to happen. But now it makes me so happy to see her wag her tail. And it's been 2 years, and she's finally a very affectionate dog with me. And just in the last, I'd say 3 months, she started kissing when I hug her and, hold her and stuff. It's like, wow, finally, it's wonderful. Just brings me lots and lots of joy. But she has separation anxiety, because as I said, she's afraid to lose me. And so the longer I'm gone, the more worried she gets. So I think, because if I have her in the car, she's always looking out the windows. And I think that's probably what she does at home, is looks out the window, watching for me. So she does things. I'm not sure if because she's anxious or she's mad, or both, or a combination, or who knows. It's like we don't know the answer to why dogs do a lot of stuff. So sometimes she'll take something like a pen or a shoe, just move it, and she doesn't chew often. Sometimes she chews things up, but not that often. Sometimes she'll go to the basement and pee. It's like, all right. I was getting pretty upset, not at her, but at the whole situation, until my friend said, she has separation anxiety. She's gonna pee. Why don't you set it up with a pee pad down there where it doesn't really matter? She was right. It's like, all right, just in case, I have this puppy pee pad in the basement, and she uses it sometimes. And if that helps her feel better, then I'm like, okay. So that's what we do. And I think that those characteristics would have driven me nuts when I was younger. Because when you're younger and trying to have more compliance and a more perfect dog, and now it's like, well, she is who she is, and that's life. So I'm kind of going with it. I have a few more things about, so Soley got very sick. And I don't want to get into that too much, except that she started, after I had her, maybe 6 months, she couldn't get into the car anymore. She wasn't eating. She had kind of stiff hind legs And so the vet did a bunch of tests and said, well, I thought it might be Lyme's, but it's ehrlichiosis, which is a tick-borne illness that you see more in the South. So we put her on several rounds of antibiotics, and finally she seemed to get better. So that was good. But then she stopped eating, and she'd eat just every few days, and that was really scary. Then the vet said, he ran more tests, couldn't figure it out, felt something, took an x-ray and saw there's a mass down there, and we don't know what it is. I'm going to send you over to a specialist in the Twin Cities. So we went there and found out that she had, they did an MRI or ultrasound or something, I don't remember now, showing that there was something kind of around her spleen, but they didn't think it was like a tumor, a cancerous tumor, and the blood work and all that showed that it wasn't cancer. So it's like, yay. But they said she's gonna need surgery, otherwise you're gonna lose her. So what would you like to do? And I was just, oh my gosh. And because I was feeling, of course, very connected and feeling affection for this dog, I said, okay, and they ran the estimate, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a lot of money, but let's do it. So we did it. She had a stem to stern incision, and it took a long time to heal, but they got it all. She had to have her spleen removed, and she was on many medications, and I had to make a grid of when to feed her what medication. It was something else. Slowly, she got better, and she was walking farther and farther, but still on prednisone. The vet here was following up, and we could not get her red blood count going up. So she was on prednisone a long time. And then finally, this last January, we had weaned her down to nothing, and this time it worked. So I was so thrilled that she was getting back to normal, and her behavior was getting back to normal. And I think that's when we were much more connected as an owner and a dog, and I could just feel that very strongly. So figuring out Soley's personality has been interesting, because she was sick a lot of the time, and she came to me very timid, and now I think I'm finally figuring out she's just a very gentle soul. And I take her to see my mom at the nursing, well, it's independent living, but there are lots of seniors, elderly people around, and she loves to go up to people, and they love to pet her. So that makes me happy and makes her happy, and her tail wags there. So my indication is tail wagging or not. And now she's a much happier dog. She's given me a reason to get out at least 3 times a day. I don't have a fenced-in backyard, so I'm out with the dog, seeing the neighbors, seeing the wildlife, seeing nature, and it just calms me down. I can feel blood pressure lowering. And I feel like now I have an outlet for love and affection that I didn't have, even though I have family in town. Being a single person, you need that connect, that love object. I felt it was a real help for me to have that in my life. And with rescues, you just don't know. There's so many questions that you don't know. Where is this behavior coming from, or what are they thinking? Or I just had to let all that go and live moment to moment with her, and that has kind of helped me live more in the moment, which is a good thing for me. So I tend to be, look ahead and be a worrier. It's like, no, don't worry about it. Just be with it right now. So I think that I look back at the dogs that I've had. The Springers were wonderful, and they fit into our lives, into my family life. And now with Soley, she's a big part of my life. And I'm very anchored to her. And it's a little different. It's a little different feeling. And I'm just interested in hearing from others. What are your feelings? How have you been influenced by pets? And do they anchor you in the moment? How? Just tell me more about, or tell me things that hearing me might trigger in your own life. I know a lot of you have dogs. I've met some of your dogs, and it's just, it's really fun. For me, I'm a dog person, so I love to see how pets interact with their owners.